The Republican-controlled House will propose yet another helping of austerity, this time in order to stave off a cut of $55 billion in defence spending. The Republicans are set to pass a whole new menu of cuts targeting, among others, school lunches for poor children and meals on wheels for the elderly. We thought it was interesting because one of the most important Republicans on Capitol Hill, Congressman Joe Barton, seems to be such a huge fan of Meals on Wheels. Here you can see him delivering food as part of the program to some of his East Texas constituents. Surely he wouldn't vote against the program, would he?
He's going to vote against it because it's going to come as a huge package, and he won't have to vote on the individual provision to end Wheels on Meals. And I can assure you they will give him the talking points to justify this to his constituents.
And joining us now from Washington is Representative Joe Barton, Republican of Texas. Good afternoon, sir.
How are you?
We want to recognise your support for Meals on Wheels and your service to the community, but are you, as Representative Gwen Moore said on this broadcast yesterday, are you really going to vote with your colleagues in the House to cut food deliveries for the elderly, school lunch subsidies for 280,000 poor children, and vote for 300,000 poor children to lose their health insurance? Are you going to vote for that?
Well, I am going to vote to honor our commitment that we made last summer to begin to reduce the gigantic federal deficit, which is last year over $1.5 trillion, larger than the entire federal budget was when I first got elected. And as a part of that, I will be voting for some reductions in programs that are good programs that, quite frankly, I actually support the underlying program. On the Meals on Wheels program, my family foundation, the Joe Barton Family Foundation, made the major anchor grant to Meals on Wheels in Ellis and Johnson County to build a new kitchen, gave a six-figure donation and helped raise another six figures. We're going to have a groundbreaking on that kitchen sometime in the next 6 months, hopefully. My wife, every week, goes out and delivers Meals on Wheels as a volunteer in Ennis, Texas. And I don't deliver them every week. I do at least once or twice a year go out, and I go to numerous events with the volunteers and the folks that run the Meals on Wheels program in my district.
So, sir, just so I understand it, you're perfectly willing to deliver these meals, and indeed your wife is gracious enough to do the same on a regular basis, but you will vote for these resources, this amount of money that's being given. You'll vote to rescind that budget. You don't want that to continue.
We have a national debt, as you well know, that's over $15 trillion. It's growing at the rate of over $1 trillion a year. We can't sustain that. There will be no money to fund any program
I do understand,
if the country
sir.
goes
I do understand your explanation. You've already rehearsed your view about the deficit.
That
just to be absolutely clear,
that is an absolute fact.
So just to be absolutely clear, you will be voting for Meals on Wheels to be cut for the provision of subsidised school lunches for 280,000 children, for health care provision for 300,000 children. You will be voting for those to cease.
We had a budget agreement last year that says we
yes
have
or no,
to
sir?
cut $110 billion.
Is that yes or no, sir?
And part of that is through a sequestration.
Is it yes or no?
And in order to not have a sequestration, the Budget Committee and the leadership in the House has reported out a bill to move some of the cuts from one part of the budget to the other, and I'm going to support that.
Excellent. So you
want the budget deficit to go down to zero as soon as possible.
Sir, I do understand your point about the budget deficit. I just want to have a yes or no answer. You are going to vote for Meals on Wheels to be slashed, for 280,000 children to lose their subsidies?
I'm not voting to slash Meals on Wheels. Meals on Wheels budget, only 8% of the Meals on Wheels budget comes from federal sources. 92% of the Meals on Wheels budget comes from private contributions and volunteer support of the folks that run Meals on Wheels.
Okay.
So having a reduction.
Sir, why would you prefer to cut Meals on Wheels for the elderly or school meal subsidies for poor children rather than raising a small amount of tax on the super rich who never ever have to go hungry? Why would you prefer to penalise the poor and the needy as opposed to asking the super rich to pay a small amount in taxes, given that they never have to go hungry? Why would you prefer that?
Well, I don't want, as you categorize it, our poor to stay poor. I want them to get a good job, to get out of poverty.
So we're talking about 80 and 90-year-old seniors who live at home and rely on the provision of Meals on Wheels. I'm not talking about 25-year-olds who have prospects for work. I'm talking about elderly people that we've seen you visiting who are not looking for jobs, sir. They're looking for a warm meal, and it appears to me that you would rather penalise that provision.
The Meals on Wheels program, with all due respect.
Yes, sir.
I won't go through that again, but we have to have an economy that's growing, that creates jobs, that creates opportunity, so that they're working people that can help the folks that you're trying to help and I'm trying to help.
Right.
I know many of the people on Meals on Wheels in Ennis, Texas. I worked with them as a young man when they were still in their working careers. They are great people. They are adorable people, and through no fault of their own, they've gotten older and their families have passed away. They need a little help. The Meals on Wheels program helps, but so do other various programs. And I want to keep the government strong, the economy strong. In order to do that, we've got to balance the budget.
Okay, so we're talking about avoiding the automatic cut of $55 billion, which, as you know, which is in the Pentagon's budget. Now, why not ask millionaires to pay a little more in tax? That would raise around $160 billion. Even the Buffett rule would raise $47 billion in 10 years. That's almost 55. Or how about ending massive subsidies to oil companies? And yet it seems to me, sir, you'd prefer to slash Meals on Wheels, to cut poor children's school lunch subsidies. I'm not, sir. That's what you're voting for. That's what you're voting for.
No, they get 8% of their budget. You know, you're not slashing it. The net effect of this budget reduction, maybe 1%. Maybe 1%. So, you know, that is a reduction. I'll accept that I am voting to reduce it.
You will know that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has expressed some very real criticism of this targeting of the poor and a refusal to raise taxes on the super rich.
The whole point of the sequestration is across the board.
Sure, but you know, sir, that that there's an absolute refusal to raise a cent in tax. Now, I know that
when you raise taxes, you generate less revenue.
That didn't happen during Clinton's period as president, but we'll talk about that another time. I know that you're a long-time member of the Methodist Church. Is that correct, sir?
That's a true statement.
How do you square your approach to the words of Psalm 146, where the psalmist writes this: He gives food to the hungry. The Lord protects the foreigners. He defends orphans and widows. Isn't this the exact opposite of the cuts that are being proposed by Republicans in Congress?
No. The Lord helps those who help themselves.
Which verse of Scripture is that, sir?
Well, it's
I don't believe you'll find that in the Old or New Testament.
Well, that was taught to me by my father, who was the president of the United Methodist School Board in Waco, Texas, and in Bryan, Texas. But in order to help people, you have to have something to help them with. In order to have something to help them with, you have to have people that can get jobs, keep jobs, progress. And when you start raising taxes and borrowing money that you don't have, you put that burden on the future generations. You also put it on the what are called the working poor.
Indeed.
So let's
not forget putting the burden on the elderly who rely on Meals on Wheels. Congressman Joe Barton, thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
It's always fun. Thank you.
Stay with us. The day's top lines are coming up.